Hello again, and welcome to the God Help You If You Have the Right Answers edition of the SEC Power Rankings.
I don't think we can put that in the full title. I think there may be a character limit on YouTube, but
there might be.
Maybe too much.
Truth and truth and advertising, or whatever the phrase would be here.
Truth and Consequences edition of
the truth and consequences, because my goodness, there were consequences. And sometimes there weren't consequences in this because you got a bad loss, I got a bad loss, everybody got a bad loss. You shake it up and see where it lands. Well, look, the College Football Playoff Committee had an easier time making its decisions than we had coming to our conclusions on these power rankings. And if you can tell me how we could have avoided that, then I have the floor here.
It was a mess. It was a mess. This week was rough. There's only 2 undefeated teams left in the conference. I mean, how do you go through a week and rank teams? It's kind of like, well, whose loss wasn't as bad? That's kind of what we've been working with.
Who did something good?
It was a messy week.
We are not ranking teams this week by who has good win, like who has the best wins. We are ranking teams by who has the least awful losses.
Yeah.
Like that is legitimately where we are right now. We are 7-8 games into the season. The SEC now has these ridiculous net rankings, which I am putting my foot down. We're not talking about these beyond this statement right here. The SEC has 8 total quad 3 and quad 4 losses, and most teams have not even played 8 games yet. So it's not good. And again, if you want to argue with us on this week's power rankings, I am all for it, please, because you are probably right. And because no one should have any idea what these things should be ranked as, because we are ranking teams based on losses, not wins. And that is not a good place to be in for the SEC right now. Unless, here's what we should have done. And I told someone this on Twitter. We should have put the 2 undefeated teams at the top. South Carolina and Ole Miss should be the top 2 teams in the SEC right now. But that's not the way we do things around here with the power rankings. But just saying.
I think number one on the list after we're done is going to be yelling at Blake, Max, and Chris.
Yep. For sure.
Because nobody's going to be happy with this. I don't even know that we're happy with this.
Are you kidding me? I don't think we're overplaying this. These fan bases are not happy with their teams right now. I mean, they're going to be more upset at their teams for playing the way they're playing and losing some of the games they're losing than they should be at us.
Who's happy with their team as of today? Yeah. Like, who's super happy? South Carolina. There you go.
The rest.
Ole Miss. There you go.
Ole Miss and South Carolina. Let's not put this on the fan bases here. Like if they want to argue, that's fine. But like this is not. They have every reason to argue because they're frustrated with their teams right now. Everyone should be, as we said, other than Ole Miss and South Carolina because they haven't lost games yet. But yet, they've still got something to prove, even though they are combined 14-0 right now to this point.
I love how we've already filibustered 3.5 minutes to avoid what's coming.
Listen, we'll get to it. We'll get to it in just a minute. When we get to the cutoff point of the top tier of teams, which can we even call them that anymore? Yeah, everyone else give us your rankings on how you would rank these teams. Who, by the way, our entire top 1, 2, 3, that list of, I think, top tier teams, quote unquote, they all have multiple losses. All of them. So, I mean, again, if we're just going by bad losses, if that's how we're ranking teams now, think about to the point we've gotten to. If we're arguing about who has a loss that's better than the other team, it's not ideal for the SEC right now.
I feel like we should insert the Carl Lewis national anthem about right now. But anyway, one more reminder before we get to power rankings. These are presented by our friends at BetOnline. The holiday season is off and rolling with NFL in full stride, the NBA and NHL hitting midseason form. BetOnline is your number one destination for all your sports wagering info with up-to-the-media sports wagering news, odds, trends, and predictions. BetOnline is a top spot for everything pro and amateur sports, not just the Big Four. BetOnline has info available at your fingertips, both desktop and mobile access at any time for almost any sport that's played, from MMA to international soccer. Head to BetOnline today. Remember to use our promo code BELIEVE for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, where the game starts. Okay, only a few things came really easy, and that's at the bottom, where Vanderbilt is once again 14. Net rankings have come out. Vanderbilt is 276 in the net. So in terms of postseason aspiration, almost over before it's barely started for Vandy here.
Yeah. We'll call this the B positive edition of the power rankings after all that negativity is out of the way. Vanderbilt finally getting their full, well, not full team, but getting their main guys playing together at this point. They are 4-4 on the season. There is nowhere to go but up for the Commodores, who will move up our rankings this week if they can get a couple wins, San Francisco and Texas Tech.
Yeah, Stack said after the last game, I'm really worried about our lack of rim protection on defense. It's made defense really tough. They miss Liam Robbins, mentioned it once already, and they're continuing to miss him. It's really affecting that defense. I'm not going to put too much weight into analytics right now, but they're outside the top 250. I mean, I take away the defense is struggling right now big time. And with all the injuries, with Lawrence being out, with Smith being out, they just haven't had the flow. And there's actually a new bottom of the SEC in plus minus. It is no longer Zakai Ziegler. It is Vanderbilt's Paul Lewis. So when Ezra and Tyron Lawrence are not in the game and they got to have Lewis come in off the bench, it's taken a huge hit to the production on both sides of the floor. So, yeah, team is struggling right now.
Number 13 is, I believe, LSU.
I'm just waiting to see if you're going to guess it right. Yeah, LSU is 13. Yeah, I mean, LSU, look, as we said, they got a couple nice wins in there, but they also got blown out at Syracuse. They beat Southeastern Louisiana by 7. They have the loss against Nicholls State, which is also part of that combined 8 quad 3, quad 4 losses for the league. So I don't know where else you rank LSU.
Yeah, I keep watching LSU games, and I keep telling myself, stop watching LSU games. No, I'm joking, but it's tough. It's tough to watch. Right now, I mean, I watched that full Syracuse game, and it was painful. I mean, Will Baker couldn't get a rebound against one of the worst rebounding teams in the country. Not going to harp on him too much. Jordan Wright if they didn't have Jordan Wright, it would be looking rough. Yeah, I mean, the team just does not have too much of a front court presence defensively, and it's hurting them.
Number 12, the Georgia Bulldogs, who actually, we talk about bad losses. Georgia doesn't really have one. Losses have been to Oregon, Miami, Providence, all teams that could make the NCAA tournament, beating Wake Forest and Florida State. Maybe we undersold Georgia here a little bit, guys. What do you think?
Yeah, let's put Georgia in the top half. Why not? Why not? I mean, let's just put them as a top 5 team in the league, because does anyone else have a strong argument to be there? You're right. They don't have any bad losses. Is that the best thing we can say about Georgia? I mean,
hey, that's a sterling bullet point on the resume for these teams we're talking about.
I know, but I hate it, but you're right. You were exactly right. They don't have any bad losses, and the Wake Forest to me is the ultimate. Are they a good win? Are they I don't know anymore, because Georgia beat them. They beat Florida. Wake Forest beat Florida. I have no idea what to make of this Wake Forest ping pong, who's played Georgia, LSU, and Florida so far. That's half their schedule at this point is SEC teams. They lost LSU in overtime. They beat Florida, who's the highest ranked team on our list, but they lost to Georgia and LSU. So I have no clue what to do with who are we talking about? I don't even know who we're talking about anymore. Georgia.
Wake
They're
Forest.
number 12. And Wake Forest maybe should be ranked at number 12. I don't know. So
I think Wake Forest joined the SEC East in the preseason. I mean, I know we don't have divisions anymore, but it seems like every game Wake plays is against the SEC.
Steve Forbes going back to the roots, former Tennessee assistant.
Right.
We're only 3 teams in, and we're already in a vortex of rankings here. This is gonna be brutal. But I mean, Georgia, hey, they beat Florida State, and they were down by like 15, 17 points there. That was a resilient win. Hey, they didn't lose it. They didn't look great winning it, but they didn't lose it. You know,
they didn't lose. This is where we are.
I feel like this is the point, like we're the school system, and kid shows up to class 2/3 of the time. He barely passes. Just little Johnny go along from 4th grade to 5th grade because.
Hey, but let's just say this though, okay? Let's say this for Georgia. We're having some fun with these power rankings because, again, folks, this week's power rankings are ridiculous. We probably shouldn't even do these, but we're doing them. All right. Georgia was at the bottom of the bottom 2 years ago. Okay, they won 16 games last year. They're 5-3 with a couple good wins. This program is headed in the right direction.
Oh yeah,
and they're 5 games before they start SEC play from here on. Georgia Tech at home, High Point at home, Mount St. Mary's at home, North Florida at home, Alabama A&M at home. They should win all of those, and they should be 10-3 going into SEC play. So Georgia's moving up. I'd like to put them in the top 5 next week. Win these games this week. I say that, right? They come out and lose Georgia.
You just gave them the kiss of death, Blake Lovell. You did.
That's how it works. So
we watched it happen.
All right, continue. Who's next?
Okay, this now. It's a holiday season. This is the Festivus portion of the power rankings. Because, buddy, I got a grievance with Mississippi State. See, we when we do our power rankings, we like it nice and we like the decisions clean cut and clear. And, buddy, a week ago, nobody was singing the praises of this team more than I was. What I said was, okay, we had some questions about them offensively. They find some answers there. And, oh, by the way, they're 6-0 without Toulouse-Smith. And they've beaten Arizona State. They've beaten Washington State. They've beaten Northwestern. Or maybe Northwestern, the only team in that may go to the NCAA tournament. But still, with these teams dropping games to teams they shouldn't, Mississippi State was taking care of business and beating good teams. They go to Georgia Tech. Max, you and I previewed that game. I think we gave Georgia Tech about a negative 5% chance to win that one based on what we'd seen. Not only does State lose that game, it loses it by 12. And for an encore, losing to Southern on Sunday. What in the world is going on here?
Well, this isn't the team that I thought we were going to see. I really don't know what's going on with the backcourt here. When I saw Trey Fort explode for 21 points against Arizona State, I know Arizona State's not, probably not a tournament team, but still it's a high major and it's your first look at the team. The backcourt looked dynamic. You had Fort banging threes. You had Hubbard coming in off the bench, who really surprised as a freshman here early on. It looked like they had a little bit more spark than last year. It was like, okay, the three-pointer problem is fixed. They got that perimeter scoring. Yeah, forget about that. I mean, Trey Fort was a healthy scratch. He didn't even play. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if that's because of lack of defense, if that's poor shot taking that has led to runouts that has really upset Chris Jans. I don't know what it is, but Trey Fort did not play. And then Andrew Taylor, who has been a healthy scratch for the past 4 games, who Jans benched because he wasn't living up to standards. He plays 16 minutes out of nowhere yesterday. It's like, what is going on with this backcourt still without Toulouse-Smith? I thought Kashawn Murphy was back. He was out yesterday. It's like, I don't even know who's playing day to day. And I don't think Jans does either. I don't think they have this backcourt identity. And, I mean, you see it, 59 points, 2 straight games, and just no shooting down the stretch. They got to figure out this backcourt, Blake.
Think about this. If Mississippi State beats Georgia Tech and Southern, they have a legitimate argument to be the number 1 team in our power rankings this week. By losing to Georgia Tech and Southern, they are now number 11. Like, that is the state of SEC basketball. That is that is where we are right now with some of these teams. I'm not saying they would have gotten the number 1 ranking, but I guarantee you they'd been in top 3. But they also would have had an argument to say, we're the only 8-0 team in the league, because they would be the only 8-0 team in the league this week. South Carolina, Ole Miss are 7-0. And they would have beat Northwestern, who beat Purdue. And you could say, all right, some of the other wins not that impressive, but we could have leaned on that. We needed something to chew on. That could have been it. But they're not, and they're number 11. So we continue on in our power rankings.
Missouri at 10, I guess. I mean,
listen.
Yet another team. Well, look, they lost to Jackson State. That was 2 weeks ago. You got to hold that against them. Since then, they darn near lost to Loyola Maryland at home, which would have been a bad loss, even worse than that. But they did beat Pitt on the road, which was a nice win. And so maybe signs of recovery for your client, Dennis Gates.
Yeah, I think I say this, I'm like, Missouri feels like they're a little low here. Reminder, this is a staff composite ranking. We had all of our rankings were so across the board this week. Ours have never been this different in terms of how we all rank them. But I feel like they're a little low, but like you said, unfortunately, they have one of the losses. Like they have the Jackson State loss. And so, you sort of have to go hold it against them to a certain extent. And the Memphis game, I mean, it wasn't pretty. Like they didn't play well in that game. I know that was game 2 of the season, but they're another team that I think you can justify moving them up a couple spots here, having won that game at Pitt, getting a solid win against Wichita State at home. Now, if they go win at Kansas on Saturday, completely different discussion. They are 100% moving up multiple spots next week. But right now, it was a slight edge for another team to beat them to that 9th spot. And so Missouri at 10, although, like I said, I think they feel like better than the 10th best team in the league. But you can't just, I say this, guys, just wait, because we're going to talk about a few other teams here in a minute that also have these head-scratching losses, and they are ranked considerably higher than Missouri. But it's just, I don't know. Like, I think we're still figuring out what this team is, and we're going to find out in these next 3 games. Kansas, Seton Hall, and Illinois.
For a week of very poor results, this is a team that did not have a poor result. Had a good week, did Missouri. And I think they're starting to find their identity a little bit with Sean East. If you follow me on Twitter, you probably are getting a little bit annoyed with how much I'm talking about Sean East. I really like the way he plays. 6 for 8 in 2 games this week. It was 3 for 4 in both of them. So that's huge. It's a big little perimeter boost that they weren't getting from Sean East before. And just one more thing on Mizzou real quick. I don't like my analytics early season, but so far they do have the 4th best block percentage. And I don't think that's something that's really going to just disappear. Aiden Shaw, Vanover, Carter, Trent Pierce, Jordan Butler, they've got some size, and it's tough for other teams to score around the rim. So I do like that moving forward with Missouri. Nice little week here.
Yeah, that's interesting, because that's not how that team operated all last year. In fact, block percentage, they would have been a 182nd a year ago. I wonder, how much of that is changes when Connor Vanover is or isn't on the floor. But yeah, I mean, they've at least got that piece this year where that was not a part of their team a year ago. So,
yep.
All right, this is where we're going to really make people mad, I think. But we're caught in between that territory of what are you doing for me now, and how good do we think you are based on your ceiling of your talent. And oh, by the way, you got some marquee coaches ahead in this list who have been known to figure it out a time or two themselves. So thus we arrive at South Carolina at number 9, still unbeaten. And if you want to argue that South Carolina should be higher, are any of us going to tell you that you're really wrong, Blake?
No, of course not. Because you could absolutely argue that South Carolina should be higher. And listen, I will say this, though. You can argue that South Carolina should be higher. What you cannot argue is that South Carolina should be higher based on their net ranking. That is my only rule when it comes to your argument, because they are 4th in the net rankings in the SEC. Okay, they're 29th overall. They're 4th in the SEC in the net rankings. We cannot use that as the only logic here. That's all I ask. So if you're going to make that argument, please do not use the 3 letters. Any profanity, which I include net and profanity to this point. All right, that cannot be used. But yes, we can 100% argue that South Carolina should be higher, because they are unbeaten. They have beaten everybody in their path to this point, which is way more than we thought they would have done to this point in the season. But here is what I will say. If you're upset with where South Carolina is this week, if they go win at Clemson on Wednesday and beat East Carolina on Saturday, they got 2 road games coming up, okay? Their first true road games of the season. If they can win both of these games, they're moving in the top 5 next week. Period. No question. They're moving in the top 5 next week. Just saying. So,
Blake, you had the same exact analysis as I did. Like, I honestly don't have much to say. That was pretty much every point I wanted to talk about. You just said they did hit 18 threes against George Washington, though. Like, the team can shoot. The team has spacing. It's not anemic to watch this team play. They look decent, but they haven't played a top 50 team. So let's just I'm not going to go too much further. Blake's analysis was perfect. Wednesday coming up here is going to be the test here. First true road game at Clemson. We've watched Clemson. We know Clemson is legit. I'm waiting for Wednesday to really talk about this team more.
Florida at 8, for lack of a better idea. Florida got wins over Florida State, Pitt, for whatever that's worth, maybe NIT type teams, and nothing really bad on the resume. Really close losses to Virginia and Baylor by 3 and 4 points, and then 11-point loss to Wake Forest last week. Look, this is another case. You win one of those big games, you probably move way up the rankings, and that's where Florida is at this moment, Blake.
Thus begins, it shouldn't begin. We actually had a team that we mentioned Mississippi State without Tolu Smith and all that, but like this is where you start to get into how do you judge teams who are not at full strength? Yep. It's like, what do you do? What do you do with Florida? Because at full strength, do I think they're the 8th best team in the SEC? No, I think they're higher than that. But they just lost a game where they were not at full strength. They played well against Baylor. Played well in the game against Virginia, but we're not at full strength. So in the games we've seen them at full strength, they look really good. But that hadn't been many, right? And we're going to say the same thing about some other teams that we're going to talk about in a minute. And so, again, this is why this is just a wacky week for power rankings, because you can argue both directions here. But if you're just basing it off power rankings, I still think Florida is pretty good, even if they have 3 losses on their schedule to this point.
I mean, no Micah Henlogten. This is a guy that had 14 and 14 against Virginia in like 25 minutes. Like, guy makes a difference. So yeah, I mean, hard to grade. I'm not at full strength, but I will say this: Riley Kugel right now has 21 turnovers and only 16 assists. He's been a little bit sloppy on the offensive end. I will say he's forcing it a little bit. Poland has been nice though. Poland comes in and has a little bit tighter handle and a nice veteran experience. He looks like he can really control the rock in tight situations. Fouling has been an issue. This team keeps getting into foul trouble. Almost every game they have been in foul trouble. So a few little things to work on, but it's not stuff that's like not fixable. Get these guys back to full strength. Have Golden coach them up a little bit, and I think they'll be fine. But tough to move them up right now.
Number 7, Auburn. Again, Auburn could have made this easy for us. Instead, you go and lose the return game in a home and home at Appalachian State, which is just kind of a bizarre arrangement there. And yeah, I mean, no bad losses for. I don't even that's even a bad loss, but it's one that you didn't expect Auburn to lose. The Tigers had won 5 straight coming into that, although no super notable wins. Maybe Virginia Tech turns out to be one. But, yeah, the Tigers sit here at 7 on Monday morning.
I mean, Auburn had a chance to be number 1 this week.
I know.
I mean, in all honesty, they had a chance to be number 1.
Yeah.
But they lost the game on Sunday, and it's just hard to – I am saying all this knowing that when we get to our top couple teams, there is going to be a potential – like, hey, you said this about this team and this about this team, but yet I understand. But this is where, again, you just have to go off of what team you think is better, right? Like, you have to just sort of start going. And Auburn, I would have said, hey, they're top 3 in the SEC if they won this game in Appalachian State, but they lose it. And so you start questioning some things again, right? And so you're like, uh-oh, do we need to worry about this area? Do we need to worry about that area? They can't shoot the ball. It's all those things. And so, yeah, for lack of a better idea, here they are at 7.
I don't know how many teams in the country could have gone into that sold-out environment and had a good, clean game. I don't think there's many. App State is going to be probably a tournament team.
I appreciate them scheduling it, though, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for playing the game. Yeah, because a lot of people wouldn't have done that. So
props to Pearl and Auburn for even playing it. UNC Wilmington got throttled by 30 by App State. Like, App State is good. They're really good. But I'll say this, 3 for 27 from 3 is not going to cut it. Still had 17 assists as a team, though, which is nice. The ball was moving a little bit. But now I've seen Auburn in 2 close games now, opening with Baylor and now against App State. And both times the backcourt down the stretch is kind of scaring me now. It's kind of scaring me. They just don't look like they have a go-to guy, a guy that can get into the lane and facilitate and just dump off to Broom. I mean, all you got to do is get into the lane and draw a little bit of some closer and make a play, and they just can't even do that. Aiden Holloway is 2 for 17 from the floor in his past 2 games. Denver Jones only has 2 games in double digits after he was averaging 20 last year. So I'm not panicking on the team too much, but the backcourt is starting to give me a little bit of worry here in crunch time. It's starting to scare me. I'm not going to lie.
All right, now we get to Ole Miss at 6, and boy, this has been an interesting season. And yes, some of it has been return of players. Ole Miss, those first 5 games, wins all against teams that are 146 or worse in Ken Pom, 2 of them by 1 point. I guess Ole Miss not just needed players, but needed to play good teams, because it has since destroyed NC State by 20 at home and then upset Memphis, also in Oxford. Chris Beard's team, one of 2 SEC teams at 7-0. And boy, we talked about teams that had bad weeks. Teams had good weeks. Ole Miss is kind of at the top of the list, and got to be some excitement building in Oxford after that.
Max, you get I'll give you the floor on this one first. So, as always.
Well, I appreciate that. I don't want to say I told you so. I'm not going to. The difference with this team this past week was Jalen Murray. It was the point guard play. That was a big emphasis, a big question in the offseason, where people were like, Chris Beard, great coach, but where's the point guard play going to come from? Well, Murray really stepped up, all right? 2 games this week, he had 13 assists and only 1 turnover. That's big, all right? That's very big for big games. And he had 12 points against NC State, 22 against Memphis. So I think played 40 minutes against Memphis. I think the point guard situation has settled itself. I think Juju Murray is this team's point guard. And the team is starting to make threes. I mean, they hit 10 threes at Temple, 7 against NC State, 11 against Memphis. I don't know if that's going to sustain itself. I don't know if you can rely on Matt Morrell going 6 of 7 every night. But the team can win multiple ways. If you need to lean on Flanagan and have him take 25 shots a game, you can. If you need to lean on Brakefield because he has a good matchup against DJ Burns athletically, you can. Morale, it's like the team can win multiple ways, and it's getting better with Cisse. So I'm not going to overreact here. I think the team could have dropped a few games early. I'm not going to act like they couldn't. They're improving every game. I think we're just going to see them start to slowly improve and get better. Hey, good start. I mean, there's not much bad you can say about this team right now.
Yeah, you mentioned Murray. I mean, he played 40 minutes against Memphis, played 36 against NC State. Like, this guy has become one of those guys that we always say you cannot take off the floor, and he is that for Ole Miss right now. And I don't want to jinx it, so I'm not going to, but I'm just saying, if you look at the schedule, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
And I'll leave it at that. Yeah, I mean, listen, I think we could put Ole Miss higher. But once again, these are composite rankings. We all rank them differently. Comes out to a number point system. They just happen to be slightly behind the next team that we're going to get to, but they could be higher, and I would not argue, because they are, to me, in this group of teams now with all these others, where it's like, hey, I mean, they've at least proven they can beat everybody on their schedule, whereas multiple SEC teams have bad losses at this point. They played some close games. They won them. All that matters. And so we're not comparing their bad losses, are we?
Nope.
Because they haven't lost one. So could totally justify putting Ole Miss higher.
Next up, Alabama. Crimson Tide have lost 2 of their last 3. Alabama still has yet to play a true road game. Number 2 offensively in Ken Pom, number 80 defensively. And boy, talk about a gauntlet of a schedule coming up. After Arkansas State, Purdue, Creighton, Arizona, guys. Blake, I'll start with you here.
Yeah. You want to talk about solidifying yourself as the number one team in the SEC if they can win multiple of those games, because no one else has a lot of good wins. If Alabama can beat Arkansas State and then win one or multiple of those 3 games, they will be the number one team in our power rankings come December, the Christmas edition. They will be number one. I can say that with confidence right now because they have the most opportunity of anybody to change their standing. To do that, they're going to have to play more defense. And, we'll see if that happens. But this is where we get into the bad loss versus, Alabama does not have a bad loss. They are 5-2 and they don't have a bad loss. They lost to Ohio State. They lost to Clemson. Clemson, as we said, is better than people have given them credit for. They're 7-0. They're unbeaten. Just outscored Alabama in that one. Like we mentioned, Alabama's not going to score 90 every night. They got to find ways to win in games where they don't do that. And so, yet, just from a power ranking standpoint, I was the high man on Alabama and the individual rankings. Like, I still think that they, are better than most teams in the SEC. But like everybody else, they've got their deficiencies. It's on defense. And they have deficiencies in that they've lost 2 games. But other than that, I don't know where you put them. But let's put them here.
All you can do is laugh. All you can do is laugh at this point. Yeah, I mean, I can't argue with you. If they go into those 3 games, Purdue, Creighton, Arizona, and they win 2 of them, that's going to be 2 more wins than pretty much every other SEC team has against quality opponents. The one thing I will say is people are saying, well, Alabama has 2 really good wins against Indiana State and Oregon. Well, you have to know that Robbie Avila wasn't available for Indiana State. He's 6'10", 240, averages 17 and 6, and shoots 40% from 3. And Alabama struggles with the low post, so that probably would have made a difference. And then Oregon didn't have Biddle or Dante when they played. So, like, I'm not buying too much into like, oh, they beat 2 really good teams. I'm not buying into that too much. But if you put this team on a neutral floor, against other teams, you're trying to do power ranking on a neutral floor with this team beat this team, blah, blah, blah. Alabama's probably going to beat most teams in the SEC right now with just how much they're going to score. You know what I mean? So I like the number 5 ranking. If their defense, tightens up a little bit and they have some good results against these next 3 teams, bump them right on up. But a lot to be seen here with how this defense evolves.
We've got Arkansas at 4. Blake, where did we have Arkansas last week?
Ooh, boys, I'm just telling you. I don't know about this one. Arkansas fans, I love you. I do. You have jumped on the bandwagon from the start. We have always enjoyed our conversations. But I don't know, guys. I just wonder if this is too high. Like, I know they just beat Duke. I am well aware. But I also know that they lost at home to Greensboro and they lost to Memphis, and they didn't look great in a lot of other games they played in. And I know it may get some blowback here, but it's just – but again, right, it's like, look who you're comparing them against. So is it okay to be reactionary to them beating Duke at home? Sure, why not? What else do we have to go on?
Right.
So, I mean, what else do we have? So – yeah, everyone's going to point out, oh, Arkansas is 117 in the net, and you guys have them at 4th in the power rankings. Who cares about the net? For starters. But I don't know. Again, I think this is where non-Arkansas fans will probably have a problem with this one. But I don't know, though. They just beat Duke. So, who, by the way, also lost to Georgia Tech, who is apparently also joining the SEC. They, I don't know, but
Tech and Wake Forest are both in the SEC or in the SEC now.
I don't know, guys. Whatever. You tell me what you think.
Blake, put it this way: we had Arkansas and Alabama both just play home games against probably 2 of the better ACC teams, Duke and Clemson. One team squeaks out a good win, and one team drops out a close loss. Switch those results, switch these rankings. That's how pretty much both teams didn't look bad. I mean, Alabama, their defense looked a little bit bad, but I mean, you barely lost against Clemson, who's going to be a really good team this year. And then, I mean, Duke missed a good amount of open shots there. And if that's not at Bud Walton, if that's at Duke, it might be a different result. I'm not separating these teams too much. Arkansas and Alabama, I think they both got stuff to work on, and I don't know how to separate them. I don't. So Arkansas at 4, Alabama at 5. Flip a coin. I don't know.
I personally would swap them, and the reason why is because of this absurdity, the fact that Arkansas lost to UNC Greensboro, who lost to Vanderbilt. Like, it makes no sense. None. This makes no sense at all. Like, what do we do with these teams? This is ridiculous. But this is college basketball, because this is what it's become. And everybody's like, I've seen people like, oh, SEC basketball fever's back and all this other stuff. Like, this is just where we are. Like, SEC has done this, I feel like, every year, although this year it has been accentuated to a point where I don't remember it being like this in a long time, where you've seen this many losses like this that just make no sense whatsoever. But when you have so many teams that have new players and all this other stuff, it is just only making it stronger to have those possibilities to losing these games. But it's also what Max said before we started recording. It's making these other programs stronger. The parity is much more. Like, you have a Greensboro team that is built to win a game like that, and also built to lose a game at Vanderbilt, right? So Barry's loving it. Like, he's excited. So it gets him fired up when we talk about this. So that's where we are. I'm going to mute, and we'll continue to the top 3.
Yeah, I swore this is going to be the year that we weren't having these conversations. I just looked at the talent in this league. So there's no way. It feels like the SEC has just left us wanting a little bit more most years. It's always this is the year the league really takes off. And I thought there's no way it's not this year. And here we are, and it's barely December.
All right. I think the only league that's really avoided catastrophe is the Big 12 right now.
Big 12. Yeah, Big 12 is clearly the best league.
Yep.
Number 3, Texas A&M, which got some debate at 1. I think really the number 1 ranking came down to 3 teams, all of which gave us reasons not last week. So Aggies just didn't look good in a loss at Virginia, which Virginia can do to you, and that was in Charlottesville. 2 games before that, the loss to Florida Atlantic on a neutral floor, and then in between the win over Iowa State. Still a really solid team. Again, this was my preseason number 1, and this is a solid squad. Are we wanting for more? Yes. Could there be a lot more? That's also yes.
I put Texas A&M at number 1 in my rankings this week. And I didn't know what else to do. But if A&M had Tyrese Radford, and this is where you can play both arguments, right? If A&M had Radford right now, if he had played, in the Virginia game, I think he makes a difference. I'm not saying they win the game, but I think they look a lot better. And that's what we have to go on right now. We're looking for teams who look better and have good, bad losses, or I don't even know how you describe the losses. Good losses is the best way to put it. They've lost to FAU. Yes, they lost the game at Virginia. Radford hasn't played in how many games now? 3. So with him, I would feel pretty strongly that this number 1 spot for them. Without him, I don't know. I still think they're one of the top 3 teams in the league. And ultimately, again, our composite puts them at 3. But I put them at number 1 this week for a lack of a better choice. And here we go, because they don't have a bad loss. There you have it.
I think there's not a worse matchup in the nation to have your 2 guard out than playing at Virginia.
Yeah.
Probably the worst matchup. And that is just because, and if you guys, I've been saying his name a lot, you're probably annoyed with me, but I'm telling you, Reese Beekman is like a Herb Jones type of guard defender. He just completely took away Wade Taylor and then completely took away Judah Mintz in back-to-back games. He is an elite guard defender, and to have Tyrese Radford out in a game where you can really use Radford to attack McNeely and these other 2 guards for Virginia that aren't as good defensively as Beekman. So definitely Radford would have made a big difference in that game. The number 1 thing I like, and we're looking at these as power rankings, right? Not just like standings. This team has played at Ohio State, at SMU, at Virginia. They've played FAU. They've played Iowa State. Is there a more battle-tested team in the conference? I don't know. Maybe Tennessee's played some pretty tough games also, but this team is going to be ready for conference play. I'll tell you that much. They are ready.
Yeah, much unlike last year where the schedule was pretty much garbage from what I remember, right. and then they turned it on once the calendar flipped to conference play. Well, I think this team will turn it on too. You Tennessee Vols are number 2. They've been number 1 for a while. Yes, I know Tennessee's lost 3 in a row. Yes, I know that the Vols looked awful for most of the North Carolina game. They haven't had a bad loss. That's the best we can say right now. One good win over Wisconsin. I think we still believe in this team, but my goodness, these guys are feeling some growing pains right now. And I think the last thing we expected was the complete defensive collapse we saw in Chapel Hill, Blake.
Listen, the only reason I'm laughing is because everyone who's watching, and you just announced Tennessee at number 2, just did an audible gasp because they know who number 1 is now. And boy, we're going to have a time with that one. So that's the only reason. It has nothing to do with Tennessee. It's just everyone figuring out, wait a second, is this team that I think is number 1? Is it actually number 1? Did you guys watch the game on? That's what I'm hearing. But yeah, yes, Tennessee, I mean, what do you do? I mean, they played the toughest schedule to this point. That's going to title it, though. What do you do edition? What the hell do you do with these teams edition of the SEC Power Rankings? That's how we're titling it this week. They played the toughest schedule, and they've won one of those 4 games. Wisconsin, Purdue, Kansas, North Carolina. Rick Barnes, I saw Rothstein put something out. Barnes just said that, I guess on his podcast or whatever, that the toughest November schedule he's ever played, which I can understand. Going to Wisconsin, and remember, all those games away from home. Not a single one of those games in Knoxville. So for that reason, I'm willing to give Tennessee a little bit of a slack because no one else has done that. No one else has played those 4 games away from home. So I still think they're a top 2 team in the league. I still put them at number 2 this week in my rankings. But at some point, you got to win games too. And so I think they'll start doing that. The schedule eases up a little. I say that. I mean, George Mason's not a bad team. Illinois is not a bad team. So it's a little bit, it looks a little better than the top, 4-15, the 4 top 15 KenPom teams they've already played to this point. So I think the Vols will be fine. I just don't think there's any reason to move them any further than 3, to be honest. So I had them at 2. Like I said, at A&M at 1, but here's where they are.
Tennessee's only played 2 home games this year. They only played 2 at home. So, I mean, they just have not played at their own arena. Tennessee at 2, I can't put them at 1 right now. I can't. They haven't won a big game yet for me to put them at 1. You know what I mean? But on the other hand, if they have Toby Awaka and Freddie DeLeon, is that 8-point loss to North Carolina? Like, is Awaka worth a few points? Yeah, I think so. Is DeLeon maybe worth a possession? Maybe. So how bad do you knock them for not having those guys? I mean, free throws in that North Carolina game were 38-16, and Adu was in foul trouble. Still clawed back and almost had a chance to steal that one. I think this team's not going to get better until Vescovi and Ziegler kind of figure it out and get back to their form. I mean, Vescovi was getting benched at UNC, and Ziegler's second worst in the SEC in plus minus. I mean, those are your 2 guys. You know what I mean? So not my number 1 team. I can't put them there, but I can't really knock them because they haven't had a bad loss. So I think they're good at 2.
All right. Kentucky trails UNC Wilmington by 14 in the first half. The Cats go on a big run, go up 55-49 with 12:51 left. And guess what? UNC Wilmington comes back in Rupp Arena, wins the game 80-73. And with that, we reward Kentucky by elevating the Cats to number 1 because that's where we are.
Blake.
Oh, I'm not saying it. I'm not going first. Are you kidding me? You guys aren't putting me in the spot. I didn't vote him at number 1. So absolutely not. I am not doing anything here for this one. Because
I didn't. Did Kentucky didn't get a number 1 vote in the poll, did they? And
I had him at number 1.
They did.
Oh, okay.
I had him
by virtue of where Max said other teams, Kentucky wound up here. So listen. Okay, let's put it this way.
Max.
I tried to throw that one off to Blake. I did.
We all had different number 1 teams this week. Okay? So just keep that in mind. Because this is not an exact science we're doing, we all had different number one teams, which is why we call this ridiculous set of power rankings this week. Because of that, it all depends on, at that point, if you're doing the rankings and you're compiling the numbers and all that, it's really a couple spots here or there can completely separate, right? Who is number one, who is number two, who's number three. That's what happened this week. Usually we are all very close together, but our top fives were all different this week. So the fact is Kentucky winds up at number one, and this is why I'm giving it to Max. You voted them at number one. I'm fine with that. I have no issue with it. But you're going to have to explain why you did that. Because, listen, Max, we were laughing because Max and I in the video, what was it? I think we did the reaction video after the Miami game, right? And I said it twice. I remember. I'm like, well, we know who's going to be number one on our power rankings next week. I said, as long as they beat UNC Wilmington on Saturday. I said it twice. I said, okay, they've got to beat Wilmington first, but, they should do that. They'll be number one next week. I at least mentioned that they had to beat Wilmington to do it. Apparently, they don't even have to beat Wilmington to be number one in our power rankings because here they are. So,
well, listen, let me try. I'm not going to explain. I'm going to try to explain why I have Kentucky at number one. Okay. And the main reason is because the UNC Wilmington game was their first game without DJ Wagner. And I know that Rob Dillingham and Reed Shepherd come off the bench and give this great spark, and everyone loves Dillingham and Shepherd. But, I mean, for a young team to be coming off of a huge win, at home where you blow them out and the crowd's going crazy, you have a little bit of a hangover, you come out a little bit slow, you don't have your point guard for the first time, and it's your first game trying to implement Bradshaw into things. And that kind of chops up the flow of the rotation and the spacing and stuff like that. So I don't want to knock them all too much, because if they have DJ Wagner in this game, like, do they win? I don't know, but probably have a better chance. You don't have to shake up the rotation as much. The reason I have this team at number one, I couldn't put Tennessee at number one. I couldn't. They just gave up 60 points to Wilmington, or not to Wilmington, gave up 60 points to North Carolina in one half. I couldn't put Tennessee at one. This is more of I couldn't put anyone else there than justifying them at number one. But that's why I think you can't knock them that much because they didn't have Wagner. That's my reasoning.
I'm just picking on you, Max. I think you can 100% justify putting Kentucky at one. And the reason is what we just said. We started this with Mississippi State. We talked about it with Florida. Teams that don't have all their players. What do you do with them? And the fact is, some of these teams have played without all their players and lost games that you probably feel they shouldn't have. And so how do you separate them, right? And so, yes, let's just we'll wrap up quickly because we don't want to hit the hour mark. But, okay, if you are, let's just say from a betting standpoint, which, oh my goodness, if we had this discussion in the past 24 hours with Georgia and Florida State and Alabama and all that nonsense. But on a neutral floor, which SEC team is favored over every other SEC team right now? I have my answer. I'm curious to see what you guys think.
On a neutral floor?
On a neutral floor, if there's one SEC team that is favored against every other team in the league on a neutral floor right now, I think there's one team that would be favored against every other team in the conference on a neutral floor. Maybe a half a point, but I think they'd be favored.
I would say Tennessee.
I would say Tennessee or Kentucky.
I think if both teams are at full strength, I think Tennessee would be favored by a point over Kentucky.
Yeah.
But I think it's that close.
Yeah, it's very close. I think if A&M is at full strength also, they're not going to give up too much points to anyone either.
Yeah. I think A&M would maybe be a couple point favorite, or excuse me, a couple point underdog to both of those teams.
I agree.
But so can we say that? I think they're still the three best teams.
I agree.
Right? They're ranked 3, obviously in our power rankings, but I do think after those 3, Not saying that Arkansas, Alabama, any of those other teams can't get there, but I think still, to me, even with the nonsense we've had everywhere else, I still think it's those 3 teams right now. Of course, we had Arkansas higher before the season started, but by virtue of what's happened, somehow they've gotten to 4 again. I ain't going to get started on this, but it just was where we are, right? They beat Duke. That's a great win. A lot of teams don't have great wins. So, man, it's incredible to think that. It's disappointing too, because the SEC has left a lot of opportunities on the table, and not just that, but you're compiling bad losses, and that's not a good place to be tournament wise, because we know, based on what the committee's done over the years, right, those are going to be held against you. So you better be rooting for all the teams that have already pulled upsets on SEC teams, because you need their stock to go higher, the rest of the way. Because if not, we know those are held against you at the end of the season, whether you like it or not. They matter. And the SEC's already got some of those just ugly, ugly losses that will be held against them come March.
Well, Blake, I'll say this also, because we are harping. We had very high expectations on this conference, but unless you're the top half of the Big 12, pretty much every single conference is doing the same thing right now. You know, so while it is bleak right now, this conference had an insane amount of transfer portal exits and return and newcomers. So if there is a conference that was due to start a little bit slow with roster turnover and then kind of get going with the amount of good coaches they have, it is the SEC. They do have the coaching to be able to go and jump the Big East and jump the Big Ten. But right now, unless you're the top half of the Big 12, pretty much everyone's having this conversation.
This has been the We Really Know Nothing edition.
Yep.
Or was it the
I gotta figure out what to title this thing now. We've had so many titles throughout this.
It could have also been the passive aggressive watch us throw each other under the bus. I like how we pull the well, I had this team ranked higher, but by implication these other jerks did not. That was my other favorite part of this when we do that.
Well, listen.
We have fun.
We do.
This is where we are.
We do love each other and we do have fun. So
this is a week where you don't have a choice.
Yeah.
So yeah. Again, I'm curious to see what everyone else thinks. Where do you stand? Where do you stand with your team right now? Like, are you frustrated? Are you excited? Like, I'm more curious to see, like, again, Arkansas is an interesting one because a very disappointing start, but then you come back and beat Duke. Alabama, your defensive issues, but you see the upside. Tennessee, you lost the 3 games against, you feel like you need to win one of those games. You didn't. Kentucky fans, like, where are you at? Like, where are Kentucky fans at, right? Like, what are they thinking after that? The highest of the high against Miami, and then you come back and get beat at home to Wilmington. So, yeah, like, it's so interesting to me. So,
all right, gentlemen, it's been fun. If you're new to us, go ahead. Well, I don't know if maybe it hasn't been fun. It's been something.
I'm having a great time, guys.
It's been an hour.
No, this is great. This is great.
All right. Hopefully there was something of value in there. Seriously, we hope you liked what we're doing here. We cover SEC football, baseball, and basketball in depth and with a lot of passion, and we have fun doing it. So if you haven't subscribed, do that. Tell a friend, hit the like button. All those things help us out. This has been Southeastern 14 Basketball Power Rankings presented by Bet Online.